The Clothes Have No Emperor. Written and narrated by Ian Purdy. Copyright 2025. Part 5. The Three Jewels. The following is a personal attempt by somebody who calls himself a Buddhist to explain and justify what on the face of it seems to be just as absurd as Christianity. Such is the nature of religion. According to the Buddha, there are only three things in this whole world that have any intrinsic lasting value. They are the Buddha, him, the Dharma, his teaching, and the Sangha, the people who follow his teachings. To Buddhists, these three things are known as the three jewels. To somebody who doesn't know anything about Buddhism, this appears to be typical religious hubris, especially so because it was the opinion of an overweight, unsophisticated savage who lived 2,500 years ago. Adolf Hitler probably said something similar about the Third Reich. Why then has Buddhism been able to maintain itself as one of the world's major religions? A Buddhist is defined as somebody who takes refuge in these three jewels, so obviously there are a lot of people who accept and embrace this superficially preposterous claim. Are they deluded? Have they been brainwashed? Buddha. The historical Buddha has been the subject of 2,500 years of romanticization, distortion, and idealization. We know very little about the actual man beyond the fantastic stories recorded in the sutras. Even his date of birth is a subject of a lot of contention and debate amongst mainstream scholars. As with all religious personalities, the historical facts are difficult to glean from amongst the often conflicting, gloriously aggrandizing accounts of his life. It is difficult to divorce the man from the prism of faith and devotion which his teachings have inspired. We do know that his name was Gautama Siddhartha, and that he was the son of the leader of the Shakya clan who ruled over a vaguely defined territory in modern Nepal. According to the sutras, he was raised as a prince, and his father shielded him from the perils of life, basically spoiling him rotten and giving him everything he wanted. However, the pampered prince ran away from his father's palace one day and saw for the first time how the common people lived. This really freaked him out. He saw old people and sick people and realized that most people's lives were nothing like his and were filled with all manner of terrible suffering. He married and produced a son, Rahul, but the memory of this one excursion into the real world haunted him, and he eventually decided he needed to get out amongst it if he was ever going to develop any real understanding of anything. One night he left his young family and the luxury of his father's palace, never to return. The Hindu religion was the dominant religious system, and there were many seekers of truth roaming the countryside, attempting to understand the nature and purpose of life. He joined a group of ascetics who believed that renunciation was the key to unlocking life's great mysteries, and engaged in a lifestyle that was the exact opposite of everything he'd experienced previously. He starved himself until eventually it occurred to him that he was probably going to die. At this point he realized that renunciation was doing him no good either physically, intellectually, or spiritually, and he abandoned this lifestyle. According to the sutras, he renounced renunciation and regained his health by accepting that he needed to eat and resume some aspects of normal living if he was going to have the mental faculty to understand why there was so much unnecessary suffering in the world. With this question drawing him beyond obsession, he resolved that he was going to sit under a tree and not go anywhere or do anything else until he'd worked out the answer. At this point, the sutras become very esoteric. They claim he sat under the tree for 7 days and describe in elaborate detail all the usual temptations and visions of demons which embroider many religious texts. He is portrayed as a great spiritual warrior who refused to relinquish his quest and actually achieved what he'd set out to do. The result was that he saw the world and everything in it as it actually is. It is said that he attained supreme enlightenment. The concept of enlightenment was a central tenet of Hinduism. It wasn't considered anything new, but the Buddha's enlightenment has had an enormous impact on the subsequent history of the world. Enlightenment is the final goal of everything which the Buddha subsequently taught. It has nothing to do with any god or gods, and it was even said that the Buddha taught the gods themselves about the true nature of reality. As already mentioned in the chapter The Gospel of Philip, the analogy of a lotus flower is used to symbolize the concept of enlightenment. The lotus plant germinates at the bottom of a pond in the mud of ignorance and grows toward the light. It must pass through water, symbolizing the emotions and desires of ordinary people, until it breaks the surface. Here it responds to direct sunlight, which represents the entirety of the Dharma, and in this light of wisdom it blooms to finally reveal its true nature. Having achieved what he'd set out to achieve, the Buddha stood up and walked away. However, the person who walked away was radically different to the person who'd first sat down and stubbornly refused to move. A Buddha is defined as a perfect human being. The platitude that nobody is perfect doesn't apply to Buddhas. They are said to have transcended the worldly condition and dwell in an ill-defined state known as nirvana. This is conveniently claimed to be beyond words and must be experienced to be understood. To most sane people, this probably sounds like just another load of irrational religious nonsense and constitutes the quintessential faith component required to become a Buddhist. You must accept and believe that you can improve yourself through your own effort and can ultimately, through your own efforts, become perfect. Anybody who has seen a statue of Buddha will be familiar with a very fat man laughing merrily like some drunken fool. People are encouraged to rub his belly for good luck. Is this really what the ancients considered to be a perfect human being? Of course not. The fat dude is actually Milo Fu, a Chinese monk who lived sometime during the 12th century AD. He was installed in Buddhist temples by the Chinese because Chinese peasants didn't consider anybody who wasn't fat to be an authority. All the nobles in their society were fat, which was considered a sign of prosperity and success. The traditional Buddha is thin, like a peasant, and they weren't prepared to accept that a great teacher could possibly be like them. Milo Fu was very popular and well loved, so to lure the peasants into the temples, he was chosen to represent the Buddha. Obviously, this is a serious corruption of the original doctrine, but it worked well for primitive Chinese peasants, and he is still considered to be the Buddha by most people who know nothing about Buddhism. He is tolerated today by serious Buddhists as representing the humorous, joyful aspect of enlightenment. Buddhists don't take themselves or any other worldly phenomena very seriously. The paradox of such a weighty individual symbolizing levity is in itself an illustration of enlightened masters' ability to laugh at themselves. The real Buddha statues display the 32 greater and 68 lesser signs of physical perfection. These have been meticulously calculated and include very specific ratios for the length of the arms in relation to the body, the size and characteristics of the earlobes, and even the patterns of a Buddha's fingerprints. How these signs of perfection were formulated is unclear, and considering they were codified after the death and cremation of the Buddha himself, are also one of the few faith components within the Buddhist doctrine. According to the Buddha, everyone has the potential to become a Buddha. We all possess Buddha nature, a seed within our being which is perfect and which must be cultivated and nurtured until it becomes us and we become it. The analogy of a drop of water absorbing an entire ocean illustrates this concept. This is the sacred meaning of the Tibetan mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. After his enlightenment, the Buddha spent the rest of his life teaching what he had realized. He died at the age of 80, by which time he had an enormous following of devotees all diligently striving to become enlightened. So what was it that separated this man from all the other religious crackpots who have peddled their spiritual wares both before and after his death? What was different about him that allowed his ideas to rival the so-called Word of God propagated by Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad? One of the most obvious differences is that the Buddha attained enlightenment through his own effort and made no claim to any form of divinity. He was a man. He was not and did not claim to be a god, and the Dharma did not come from any god or gods. He worked it all out by himself. Buddhists do not worship the Buddha in the same way that Christians or Muslims worship their concept of God. Buddhists revere the Buddha as a great teacher and are reverentially grateful to him for sharing the fruits of his enlightenment with the rest of us. The sutras say that after his enlightenment, he hesitated before beginning his ministry because he didn't think that people would be able to accept or understand what he had realized while sitting under the Bodhi tree. He almost kept it to himself. The reason why he didn't was the immense compassion he felt for the rest of humanity, suffering through their series of lives in ignorance without any real hope of understanding what and where they were or what they were doing. What ultimately set him apart from the other purveyors of religious ideas was the profound wisdom inherent in his teaching. He encouraged his followers to test his teachings against what they already knew, and if they found them unsatisfactory or they found something better, they should discard what he'd taught them. He did not demand blind faith and encouraged his followers to remain true to their own inner truth, their own Buddha nature. So what was this amazing wisdom which the Buddha realized and which has caused Buddhism to spread into and flourish in almost every culture and society on earth? Dharma. The relative reality we live in has only two components: movement and space. All the rest is illusion created by their interaction. Modern quantum physics has confirmed this to be correct. The more we look into phenomena, the less there is to see and measure. Atoms are mostly empty space with moving electrons, which can only be defined by either their velocity, movement, or their position in space. Beyond that is the realm of subatomic particles, which we attempt to understand through quantum mechanics. This understanding involves things like Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and intellectual anomalies like Schrödinger's cat. At the subatomic level, the illusion we call reality is revealed, and this has caused quantum physicists a lot of problems because they continue to insist on the scientific misconception that objective reality is real. The Buddha described all phenomena as dependent arisings. Everything in our world is the result of causes, but is empty of inherent independent existence. We and everything else are all a dependent arising. We are the result of causes which, if removed, will cause us and everything else to cease to exist. This can be understood more clearly by considering the causes of life, such as air, water, and temperature. If any of these things did not exist, then nor would we. Therefore, nothing exists independently in its own right, including you. You are a part of the universe, and without it, you would not and could not exist. The Buddha taught that everything has three characteristics. Firstly, everything is impermanent. That's pretty obvious, and we regularly say that nothing lasts forever. Scientists tell us that one day the sun will die, and with it everything else in our solar system will perish. This leads to the second characteristic, which states that due to impermanence, everything causes suffering. This is not something that is so obvious to us in our modern world. We prefer to believe that accumulating possessions will ultimately make us happy. Some people even consider that the purpose of life is to gain as much stuff as possible, and we measure success and failure according to this criterion. However, if we can step outside our modern paradigm for a moment to consider the possible impacts that all this stuff can potentially have on us, it becomes clear that as well as making us happy, everything can also make us sad. If we apply this to the new car we've just bought, which is our pride and joy for a while until it gets its first scratch or we have an accident, this is not so difficult to understand. The more we cherish some impermanent thing, the more we will suffer because of it. Everything is in a constant state of flux and is constantly changing. This includes you, and you might like to consider the state of your circulation or your digestion, which are constantly changing within you and affecting how you feel and think on a moment-by-moment basis. The fact that everything causes suffering does not negate the fact that things can also give us pleasure, which is what we choose to focus on in our modern culture. We are encouraged to believe that attaining our goals and accumulating possessions will make us happy. According to the Buddha, this is not so, and explains a lot of the predicaments our modern world is currently facing. The third characteristic is more profound and is unique to the Dharma. It's what's known as the doctrine of non-selfhood. This is the big one. It states emphatically that there is nothing and nobody that has any right to consider itself as a separately existing entity or self. According to Buddha, you have no self. There is no such thing. We are all an inseparable part of the whole, and our idea that we have or are a self is part of the illusion that we generate and maintain. Dependent arisings cannot have a separate self-entity. Hopefully by now you are beginning to realize how profoundly different the Dharma is to every other system of belief, and that it is diametrically opposed to most of what we consider to be true in our modern, scientific, commercially driven world. The Buddha gave his very first teaching at a place called Sarnath in modern-day India. This was said to have been the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, and a representation of this wheel is at the center of modern India's national flag, demonstrating that they still take this very seriously. The Buddha used this occasion to espouse the Four Noble Truths, which are an essential foundation of the Dharma. The first noble truth is the truth of suffering. This is not a nice truth, and it is something many people do not want to face. We've already touched on this unfortunate aspect of reality as the second characteristic of all phenomena. Everything causes suffering, and because of this, we are all suffering. Most of us spend our entire lives in denial of this sad fact. We try to pretend that our possessions are making us happy, and we even envy those who have more than us. This denial causes us to become greedy and selfish, which ultimately results in even more suffering, not only for us, but for everyone around us. Most of what we regard as pleasure is really just a more attenuated form of suffering, which, due to its impermanence, can never ultimately be satisfactory. Even the Dharma causes suffering. Knowledge of this truth itself causes misery, and some people have claimed that the Buddha's message is therefore pessimistic. Fortunately, the Buddha didn't only reveal his first noble truth, and the three which follow offer a lot more hope. The second noble truth explains why everything causes suffering. The reason is our own desire or craving for things. We've been fooled into imagining that some things are desirable and that we need them. This is the root cause of most of our suffering. We spend our lives wishing we had things, and when we get them, we invariably find that they are unsatisfactory. They don't last and usually bring other problems with them which we hadn't anticipated. The things that we desire the most cause us the most suffering. This brings us to the third noble truth, which states that the way to stop things causing us suffering is to stop desiring or craving them. Obviously, we all need to have some possessions in order to live a comfortable, productive life. The Buddha rejected renunciation and was not trying to tell us that we have to learn to live without everything. He taught the middle way and encouraged his followers to avoid extremes of interpretation and action. His point was that we should deal with things skillfully, understanding their impermanence so that we don't allow them to ruin our lives. If we are aware that it is our desire for things which causes us to suffer, we can change our attitude and diminish the suffering we endure because of our possessions. When we accept that everything is impermanent and cannot grant us ultimate satisfaction, we reduce our attachment and are beginning to develop wisdom. The fourth noble truth is not as straightforward as the preceding three. The Buddha prescribed the Eightfold Noble Path as the ultimate means to remove our desire and thus end the tyranny of stuff which has been driving our suffering. The Eightfold Noble Path involves cultivating a wise approach to our understanding, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. Paradoxically, this is another way that the Dharma causes us to suffer, because due to our desire to end suffering, we have to make an effort and change. This is not easy, especially in a world where we are constantly bombarded with slick advertising created by people with enormous budgets dedicated to the sole purpose of revving up our desires. On this basis, it is easy to understand why there is so much suffering in our sophisticated modern world. There is no emphasis on cultivating contentment and no incentive to even moderate our frantic, self-serving behavior or to tone down our supercharged desires. Instead, we are all encouraged to compete to satiate our insatiable cravings. Through this mindless process, we are literally destroying our world. The teachings on reincarnation and karma already existed as part of the Hindu and many other Eastern religious traditions. The Buddha acknowledged the truth of these doctrines and was able to refine and extend them. The Buddhist concept of rebirth differs from the Hindu notion of reincarnation. The Buddha denied the existence of the Atman, or an eternally existing, unchanging soul. Originally, the Buddha did not intend to establish a new religion and merely saw himself as a reformer. He taught the wisdom of equality, which states that all sentient beings have an equal right to happiness. This clashed with the Hindu caste system and their belief that people incarnated into different castes due to their karma. The Buddha taught compassion and didn't accept that karma is the sole arbiter of people's fate. By training our minds, we can free ourselves from all forms of suffering. But more than that, by cultivating wisdom, we can wrest control of our personal evolution and steer it towards the only worthy goal, enlightenment. The Buddha redefined the law of karma as simply action and reaction. It is the means by which the universe maintains its balance. Any action which creates an imbalance, either positive or negative, will induce a corresponding reaction to reassert the balance necessary to maintain the illusion of reality. Because the Buddha did not accept the existence of a creator God or any uncaused cosmic force, or the need to worship any form of deity, Buddhism is not technically a religion. It is a system of mind training which aims to liberate beings from suffering. The Buddha did not consider rebirth in heaven to be a worthy goal of human life. He accepted the existence of gods, but taught that they are impermanent like everything else, and that once their good karma has been exhausted, they will also die and fall into lower realms of existence. He also rejected the idea of an eternity spent in hell. Hell beings will also be reborn into higher realms once their bad karma has been expunged. As well as denying the existence of a creator God, the Buddha also denied the existence of an eternal soul. He considered this an aspect of the illusion of self. He taught that due to impermanence, everything is in a perpetual state of flux and is constantly changing, and therefore the concept of an eternally existing soul is unsustainable. Even Buddha nature is subject to change, as it is skillfully cultivated over many lives. This gives rise to the question, what is actually reborn? The Buddha compared a life to a candle's flame, which when used to light another candle cannot be said to be the same flame. He also used the analogy of a moving ball striking another ball and transferring its movement, karma, leaving the first ball stationary and setting the second ball in motion. The Buddha's message is counterintuitive, and some would even argue it is illogical. It certainly isn't common sense. It is wisdom. Common sense enables us to navigate through our ignorance, whereas wisdom destroys ignorance and frees us from our addiction to worldly nonsense. Common sense drives us through the rat race, whereas wisdom draws us to a higher reality. Yeshua's invocation to turn the other cheek illustrates this reality. The Buddha did not claim to have invented the Dharma. He taught that the Dharma is the pre-existing immutable law of the universe, and he merely rediscovered it and presented it in a way so that others can benefit from it. The sole purpose of everything he taught is to gain enlightenment so that we can be freed from suffering. Obviously, there is a lot more to the Dharma than what I am telling you about here, and there are many thousands of volumes of enlightened commentaries elaborating on every aspect available in almost every language. The fact that you have encountered and understood the fundamentals of the Dharma means that you have created enough merit in your stream of lives to qualify to begin to train your mind. The Dharma tells us that there are only three things that a human being can control. This has already been elaborated on in the chapter Virtue, but it is worth briefly repeating here. The first is our speech. Controlling our speech requires that we speak only the truth at all times and refrain from gossip and speaking badly about others. All our speech should be refined and accurate. Once we have learnt to control our speech, we can begin to learn to control our body or our actions. Your body should be lean and strong, and your actions should reflect the truth that you speak, with no remainder. If we are able to gain control over our speech and body, then we are ready to begin to control our mind. This is achieved through one of the many types of meditation which the Buddha prescribed. Most techniques begin by observing the breathing. Breathing is one of the few physical processes that is both voluntary and involuntary. Consciously using your mind to control your body is the first step in taking control of your mind and subjugating it to your will. Training your mind requires a lot of effort, but when you gain control over your mind, you can control everything. This is the ultimate realization of the Dharma. The Gospels of Philip and Thomas contain clear examples of Yeshua's enunciation of the Dharma, the immutable law of the universe. The Dharma is not the exclusive property of Buddhism, and aspects of it are contained within every valid religious and spiritual tradition on our planet. Sangha. The Sangha is everyone who takes refuge in the three jewels, or more generally, anyone who simply considers themselves to be a Buddhist. The Sangha is divided into three major schools or paths. These are the Hinayana, small vehicle, the Mahayana, large vehicle, and the Vajrayana, the diamond or lightning vehicle. Within these three vehicles, there are other divisions, usually differentiated by tracing the lineage back to a specific enlightened master. For example, Zen Buddhism, which originated in Japan, is a subdivision of the Mahayana tradition. Each school is a path to enlightenment, and it is only the methods employed within these three vehicles that differ. The Hinayana, or small vehicle, focuses on the enlightenment of the individual. Enlightened Hinayana practitioners are known as arahants. The Hinayana tradition emphasizes the Four Noble Truths and the 5 skandhas, or the 5 primary components which make up a human being. These are the body, consciousness, feelings or emotion, the will, and lastly, the karmic predispositions which the person has created through their past thoughts and deeds over many lives. In none of these 5 skandhas is there anything permanent or independently existing which can be considered to be a person's self, and the Buddha taught that belief in such an entity was the root cause of ignorance. Hinayana Buddhism is predominantly practiced in what are known as the southern schools of Theravada Buddhism, which include Thailand, Myanmar, Vietnam, and Cambodia. The Mahayana or large vehicle is mainly practiced in the northern schools, situated in China, Japan, and India. These schools focus on the lofty goal of the enlightenment of the entire human race. They emphasize the teachings on compassion and introduce the ideal of the Bodhisattva, or the enlightened master who chooses to be reborn back into this world to help others to attain enlightenment. The Mahayana was the source of Milo Fu, the fat dude, a large man for a large vehicle, who is considered to be the Buddha by people who are ignorant of the true nature of Buddhism. The Vajrayana or diamond or lightning vehicle propagates Buddhist Tantra. It is described as the express path to enlightenment because it fast-tracks the process so that enlightenment can be attained in a single lifetime. This is only possible because of extensive practice during past lives, and the opportunity for initiation into any specific tantric practice is the result of karma. Tantra uses sexual metaphors to describe its methodology. This has caused a lot of confusion and misinterpretation amongst those who have not studied Tantra in its correct context. It was derived from Hindu Tantra, where similar misunderstandings have led to some bizarre sexual practices and interpretations. In Buddhist Tantra, wisdom is symbolized as the female component and is related to the moon. A woman's sexuality is cyclical, like the moon, and contains within it the timeless wisdom required to produce children. The masculine aspect, related to the sun, represents the method. It is through the method or actions of the male that conception is possible. Enlightenment is attained by uniting the method with the wisdom and results in the symbolic birth of a new enlightened consciousness. Tantric practitioners are initiated into one or several tantras by an enlightened master who assumes the role of guru or spiritual guide. All tantric initiates must take a vow forbidding them to disclose the details of their practice to non-initiates, ensuring that tantra maintains its purity and therefore cannot be denigrated or sullied by the thought processes of the uninitiated. There are 4 tantric sets comprised of either male or female tantras, culminating in the highest tantra, the Kala Chakra, which is both male and female, its practice a combination of wisdom and method. Examples from the lower tantric sets includes Vajrayogini Tantra, which is female and emphasizes wisdom training, or the Yamantaka Tantra, which is male, emphasizing the method for attaining enlightenment. The Vajrayana is practiced mainly in Tibet and is the source of many living masters, His Holiness the Dalai Lama being the most internationally recognized. Bodhisattvas, whose lineage has been confirmed by living masters, are known as Tulkus and bear the title Rinpoche. Within the 3 vehicles there are many different levels of realization. Some people are born into Buddhist communities but have little affinity with the actual doctrine. These are the people who go to the temple to pray to the Buddha for more fortunate circumstances in this life, or they may be devotees of Milo Fu or Kuan Yin, the historical female bodhisattva. In this way, Buddhism caters for the religious needs of ordinary lay people. Above this, there are many levels of practitioners or people who are aware of and are actively seeking to reduce their ignorance. Then there are the monks and nuns who devote their lives to Dharma practice and who are genuine seekers on the path to enlightenment. Also within the Sangha are the enlightened masters who usually act as teachers. They embody the Dharma and provide inspiration for those who are blessed to be able to follow their example. Enlightened masters are an entirely different category of human being. Besides their obvious compassion, humility, patience, and kindness, they appear to be living atop a boundless fountain of bliss. They are prone to spontaneous outbursts of mirth for no particular reason and embody the living ideal of nirvana. The Buddha prescribed the 5 precepts which all Buddhists are encouraged to adopt. They are: refrain from stealing, refrain from telling lies, refrain from killing, refrain from engaging in inappropriate sexual activity. This includes rape, sex with minors or animals, and adultery. And finally, refrain from consuming intoxicants. The reason behind these 5 precepts is that these activities destabilize the mind and make it more difficult to attain enlightenment. They also have a negative effect on families and communities. Because Buddhism is considered a religion, it also provides appropriate ceremonies and guidance for the key transitional phases of human life: birth, marriage, and death. The Sangha is thriving on every continent on the planet. Its members include people from all races, classes, and professions. It is the jewel which glitters in every society, drawing people together in the universal quest for knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. Hopefully, this brief summary of the 3 jewels has illustrated the unique nature of Buddhism, differentiating it from other religions and philosophies. Of course, there are similarities and parallel concepts in many other doctrines. However, nothing else, from other ancient religions through to modern quantum physics and psychology, presents an understanding of the nature of reality as comprehensive and detailed as the enlightened wisdom of the Buddha. But more than that, contained within the Dharma is the means to empower everybody to expand their minds to grasp this same glorious totality. We can all become Buddhas, and many have already attained this exalted state. This is the actual purpose of our existence.